Despite making a super long video yesterday, there's way more changes to still discuss, and I wanted to weigh in on how I'm perceiving this massive patch, and some stuff you definitely want to look out for. Number one, Batiste's immortality field has some outrageous playmaking potential. I'm gonna hold my thoughts on its top level meta implications, but for the mass player base, it is outrageous, and puts a ton of power into the support's hands, especially when you really combine it with a hero that's normally very greedy, like a Bastion. Typically weak to focus fire because it can't move, but if it can't die, well, everything else on his screen dies. Now, it'll take some time till players realize that when the immortality field is tossed out in the middle of the fight in the chaos, that it has to be focused. Otherwise, you're just not doing any relevant damage at all. But still, there's some pretty cute ways where you can hide it around corners to break line of sight from where they could even see it. Spirit Candy on Reddit showed that it can be placed underneath a payload. So it's gonna be cool to see how the hero develops as we really start to master where he can go and what he can do, especially when you abuse the line of sight mechanics of the immortality field, which I think is by far his strongest ability. Okay, I just wanted to show you that quick, but we gotta move on. We have a bunch of news items to cover in today's video as well. First up, brace yourselves. I don't think Mercy players are gonna be too happy about this change. Originally, it was shown on Reddit by Skyward Sword that maybe this is a buff. When you're flying with Valkyrie, you can dodge as you're rezzing someone. Sounds like a good thing. However, if we look over to Dredro, now, because knockbacks are always consistent, things that used to interrupt their strength, like when Mercy was flying and locking on to channel Resurrect, well, now you just fly really far, and this is going to go for all boops in the game. It's going to have a consistent value, Wrecking Ball running into you, Diva Thrusters, etc., etc. It's going to be way easier to interrupt Mercy's Resurrect, so despite being able to dodge while rezzing in Valk form, I would say overall this is a nerf to the character. But easy come, easy go, where these movement interactions hurt one character, well, they kind of super buff Diva, who now gets the benefit of speed boost where she otherwise wouldn't, and because of that, you can send Diva bombs miles in the distance. These clips are from Blase, DPS player from the Boston Uprising, also shows there's been some beneficial changes to Genji's animations. If you hit deflect at the end of your Genji blade, it used to be canceled by the animation of you putting your blade away. Now you hold onto that deflect and can cancel it with a dash. Good stuff for Genji. Now there's some follow-ups from yesterday that I want to cover. First up, I just straight up had a senior moment and missed out on this Doomfist buff that came through in yesterday's patch to the PTR. Rising Uppercut and Seismic Slam cooldown has been reduced from 7 seconds to 6. This might not look like too much to get excited about, but I think it sort of shows where Blizzard wants to push the character to be that really durable brawler DPS rather than the high damage output one that he was previously. Because of course, if he can use his abilities more often, as long as he keeps landing them, I mean, that's just more and more health, right? So this doesn't only increase the rate that he plays and the pacing of how he goes in and out, he also will be getting more health. And as well, I think he's a bit of a sleeper pick against GOATs right now. People think he's absolutely useless, but up against the ground-based comp, where really your punch was your best ability against it anyway, and it's still lethal, I think Doomfist is kind of playable. There's just not really much point in the current meta anyway, but that may be changing as time goes on. Special shout out to Dream on Twitter, who clarified this for me, and as well, developer Josh No went to the forums to clarify how these armor changes actually apply to a lot of the heroes we know and love. If you remember yesterday, I said that now dot damage no longer is affected by armor at all, go into that in a second, but also beam damage has a flat 20% applied instead of the normal -3 damage for every tick or instance. They went a completely different route that they were talking about with how the tick damage goes up. They just ignored that completely, and now there's a flat 20% rate, which is actually a massive buff for a character like Winston up against armor, because his damage used to be like halved up against armor. So it's doing like 30% more because the reduction is only 20% against armor. Now this also applies to Zarya, Symmetra, and Josh No explains this a bit more in his post. Armor used to have a varying effect on damage over time and beam type weapons based on how damage instances were handled by the server. This meant that Winston's primary fire would hit the maximum 50% 30% damage reduction against armor because it had a faster damage update rate, while Zarya's beam would lose a flat 15 damage per second. So the general results after this patch are Winston's damage is increased against armor compared to before. Moira is about the same, Zarya and Symmetra are roughly the same at low charge and deal less damage to armor health pools than before while at high charge. So the long and short of this is there's a brand new system of how beams interact with armor, and for the most part it's the same, except Sim and Zarya at high charge will do a bit less, 20%, but Winston will be doing way more. With any luck, this makes Goat's comp a little bit weaker, and also playing Winston up against Goat's comp a bit stronger, and it was already pretty decent. It's kind of a boomer bust matchup, I think. Like, the Winston can go in and farm Primal in like 2 seconds, and now he'll farm it even faster, which is crazy. And then they use that to win, but otherwise, if like the Rhine gets on point, it just runs over the Winston comp because he can't really stand and hold his own. He has to be harassing while they're in transition, so it's pretty cut and dry on how that matchup plays out. But the new patch will bring an entirely different way to play it. Moving on, Jeff Kaplan posted onto the forums, and if this was more clear on what it was, I might have even put it at the start of the video, because this could be an extremely big deal, or maybe, I don't know, they're just testing something. He says this: we're testing some under-the-hood changes on the PTR that affect the matchmaker. These changes are only enabled in the arcade. We needed to put load on arcade modes to load the matchmaker. Quick play will be up soon. In the meantime, you can enjoy a custom game. Thanks for your patience. So what this means is they're toying with some systems in the matchmaker. What they typically do with this kind of thing is put it into an isolated playlist before they ramp up to try to make it work in quick play or comp. But nobody plays comp on PTR anyway, so I'm kind of confused at that. Usually they don't even enable it, but right now it's on the PTR just grayed out, which means they're going to unlock it later with some of these changes, which we don't know what they are. I don't think we're going to receive anything out of this quite yet, but what it probably is their research into how they're going to go about whatever big ranked matchmaking fix that they're looking to do. Is it roll queue? Is it some other option that's a bit more complicated? I'm pretty sure this is the first step towards that. All right, so that's it on the news. I thought for the rest of the video, having played the PTR nonstop since it came out, as well as watching some streamers as well, I thought I would come in and start to discuss what I think of the power level of the different changes that were made. I'll go into more depth on this in an upcoming meta discussion, but some of the early thoughts that I have is, one, Orisa is kind of nutty. There was a lot of buffs and nerfs that went through on the PTR. I think one of the most significant ones was to Orisa, whose gameplay I showed in the background for the majority of this video, and the reason why I think it's so significant is because it allows Orisa to dodge and shield dance while shooting, which effectively means she gets to shoot a big percentage more than she used to. Because before, if you had to reposition, you had to straight up stop shooting. And that's how I would have advised you to do in my Orisa guides. Make sure you get behind your shield, don't take damage. As soon as they start to outposition you, you have to run for the hills to get better positioning. But if you can shoot back while doing that, which I think you can now, because the movement penalty feels minuscule now, to be honest, which helps you reposition, but also helps you straight up win frag battles. Because if you move faster while shooting, you can shield dance more effectively. I mean, how annoying is Winston when he shield dances at his full move speed, going in and out of his bubble, right? Well, if Orisa can do that, that speed is actually increasing her lethality, and she's going to be a lot harder to kill, particularly up against the things that were originally very good against her. Anything that can get on her, like Dive and Genji exploited her, but even Goat's comp as it runs her over, when she had to choose between shooting and doing something or full out running away and doing nothing, it was kind of too all in, making Orisa's playstyle a lot less flexible. Whereas now, because she can reposition while shooting quite effectively, that's going to get quite a bit stronger in the next patch. Another thing, back to those armor changes I was talking about earlier, now that dot damage outright ignores armor entirely, Ash's TNT absolutely farms Goat's comp, and it already was really good against it. Getting more damage out of TNT means even faster Bob charge rate, and it already was insane, not to mention all the other things that are included in this patch. Now, it seems like most of what we had so far doesn't directly go at the Goat's comp, but so many other things got better that it might be on its way out anyway, especially because it looks like to me, although I think people are overrating Batiste a bit, assuming that he can fit in like every comp. It's like, oh, we can throw him in Goats. I don't think you can play him in Goats at all. I think he's really bad in Goats. But a comp that he definitely does fit in is these multiple DPS single tank comps that we see try to counter Goats at the pro level. Quick play comps, essentially. Batiste looks insane in a quick play-esque setup where you have a lot of squishies spread across the map. Because he exploits high ground so well, he almost is a DPS in its own right. For a lot of cases, his weapon is difficult to use, but when you master it, it definitely can put out the hurt. And just the way that he puts value out from range and has these big spikes of impact with Immortality Field. We've already seen pros use Soldier 76 instead of a support to make a quad DPS comp, either with Wrecking Ball or Orisa as the main tank. And I think you just straight up take him out, drop a bit of firepower, but gain all sorts of other utility and a much better ultimate, frankly, out of Batiste. So with just that comp alone, even if nothing else changed in the game, even if Blizzard didn't buff and nerf all sorts of other stuff to try to make it competitive with GOATs, I think we would see him in the Overwatch League, just in that comp alone, whenever it gets played. Now, granted, it's a small pick rate comp, right? Not top of the meta, but between that or even just straight up normal bunker comp, I think he definitely has a place because of the high impact potential that Immortality Field has to save you from combos and aspects of the game that you really never could have been saved from before. It used to be, well, they're playing GOATs, they'll eventually get Grav Diva Bomb, they launch that at you, pin your shield out of the way, GG, you just all die. There's nothing you can do. Only Lucio Sound Barrier can kind of save you. Well, Immortality Field saves you from that and a bunch of other stuff too, every 15 seconds or whatever it is. So I'm really excited to see how those types of interactions develop. He does have some weaknesses. Despite Jeff Kaplan saying he's a main healer, I think you're going to want to be looking to be more offensive with him than some support characters might be comfortable with. But that's not a bad thing because he just straight up wins high ground. Like, he goes and gets it and can win duels because he has a field he can drop, which is one of the best tanking abilities in the entire game, maybe the best, in terms at least peak output. If a fight's committed, and you drop that thing, and they don't have one, I mean, they have to use a support ult to stay alive or something, right? It's pretty simple, quick maths. It has the potential to just win a fight all on its own, which I know is something we say like of Onanade, but this even more so. It's also easy to waste it and not get any value out of it at all, but it has some serious potential, and well, that's where I'm gonna cut off the video, just giving you some of my thoughts moving into this patch. It's got me excited to start testing things out in Overwatch again. I don't know how excited everyone's gonna be about the Orisa Bastion Batiste meta that's coming up, making Bastion the most viable he's ever been, I think. You almost don't even need Teleporter. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to leave it a like. It really does help us out and lets us know that you're enjoying the content. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell icon so that you get notified when our videos go live. Link in the description is our Twitter, where we tweet out news updates and dank memes. That's been it for me. I've been FREEDO. For your Overwatch, I'll see you guys next time.